Tom, we spent some time trying to understand what the hell this new provision on Bill 96 that kicks in on Thursday has anything
Yeah,
to do with anything. So I know you talked about it earlier this morning. I
yeah.
still don't understand. Number one, this wasn't telegraphed in any way, shape, or form. This is just kind of thrown at us today. What's going on here as far as you can tell?
Oh, it was definitely in Bill 96, and those of us who pay attention to these things were. This is why I've been so opposed to many of the provisions in 96, and it's a bit of a mug's game too, because the minute I say, well, I'm opposed to many of the provisions in Bill 96, you get the tisk tisk answer, which is, oh, so you don't care about the French language? Actually, I do, and that's why I think that. Minister Christine Fréchette deserves congratulations for a very positive announcement today, because she says, you know what, instead of having these big arguments about who's eligible for French courses, this is something that, by the way, Greg Kelly has pushed for a long time. Everybody should be eligible for them. Now the government's going to finally do that. So they're doing something positive. But at the same time, talk about blowing hot and cold. This is the worst picayune bureaucratic nonsense you're ever going to see. Somehow, out of the blue, you've got a 5-person operation, and of course, you can dedicate some of your staff to filling out forms and performing, without any qualifications, credentials, or guidelines, language tests on your employees. It's completely nuts. It goes against every single possible precept of letting businesses be businesses, all the way back to Dr. Camille Lorrain, Bill 101, August 1977. It was, we're going to have franchisation programs for big businesses, 100 employees or more, medium-sized businesses, 50 to 99, a very light touch. They're going to have to give us some information. What in heaven's name do they think they're doing going after dépanneurs? It is completely bonkers. Only here in distinct land will you come up with that sort of thing. And I think that the business community is going to have to push back hard. Otherwise, it's just going to continue. There's a guy named Pierre Fitzgibbon who always pats himself on the shoulder and says he's the guide for everything Montreal and business in the caucus and in the cabinet of François Legault. Well, it'd be really nice to hear him actually do something instead of just talking about it.
Okay, here's what I don't understand. Maybe you can sort of clarify this. So you mentioned the part about businesses back in the original Bill 101. Even with this CAC government, we were told it would apply, the French rules would apply to businesses of 25 to 49 employees. While all of a sudden, my understanding is that businesses of fewer than 25 employees don't necessarily have to even comply with those provisions. They don't qualify. They're not businesses of 25 or more. Why 5 employees? Where did that come from?
That came out of the regulation-making power that the government has given to the office. And the bureaucrats are allowed to start making lives miserable, even if people. So the 25 are pluses for what we would call a full-blown franchisation program. And those are the things that were only for businesses of 50 or more for the past 46 years. So now they're actually going to come up with ways to try to make everyone's life a little bit miserable. And think about it for a second. How is the average business owner with a half a dozen employees, including themselves, how are they actually supposed to determine the level of French or the competency or, the ability to speak French of their employees? It's amazing that the Quebec government has nothing better to do. It's because everything is fine in the health sector. There's nothing left to fix there. And, of course, the education sector, we're simply the best in the world. All you have to do is ask anybody in the Quebec government. They'll tell you that. So, they've got to turn their minds to something like this, going after people who own mom-and-pop shops with a handful of employees.
What do we have any sense of what the repercussions would be for not complying? I mean, how do you even begin to enforce something like this? And are we talking about fines? What do we know, Tom?
Oh, yeah, sure. There are always fines associated with the failure to comply with any statute, provincial statute, including this one. So yes, of course, we could go through that and then maybe wind up back on 60 Minutes like the original language cops back in the day.
So I want to let this go, but I will point out one other thing in this provision when it goes into effect, right? And one texter, and it came up in our discussion earlier on. This will be posted, this information, and be publicly available, right?
Yes.
What business is it of anyone, because it's going to be up there for anyone to see, of what I do as an employer in my business?
One, and two, of what you've self-declared. and which your employees have self-declared. But you can just imagine if you've got a business that has very few people who can speak French, or that the employer says, well, the French isn't good enough, maybe I better be careful how I fill out this form. You can just understand that, in this day of social media, you can just see lists going around. Start bombarding this place. Here's their email address. Start using all of your best insults for them.
It just seems to me like creating a problem that doesn't need to be there, and with no reason, no rationale behind it. I don't know.
It's a solution to no known problem.
Right. I don't get it. By the way, I will point out Tom used the word picayune, which I thought was worth noting.
It was very impressive.
Today, so,
yeah, very impressive. And again, I'm just curious because I thought under Bill 101 there were exemptions. So those exemptions no longer apply because
No. Well, the 25, the 50 has been lowered down to 25 for the full-blown franchisation programs.
Okay.
Which again presumes that you've got somebody in your business with absolutely nothing better to do than to fill out forms.
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to ask you what you thought of the Liberal get-together over the weekend. Mark Tanguay saying, well, you know what, there is room for nationalist voices in the party. Kind of got taken to task, I guess, on that from one party member whose name I've conveniently forgotten. So what do you think about this? I mean, you kind of wonder, this is the party themselves who don't seem to know what they want or what they represent.
Here, Mr. Rand. What a good way to put it. It really is. I mean, full disclosure, I was once a Liberal MNA, elected a few times, and even became a minister. And my great-great-grandfather actually founded the Quebec Liberal Party. So I do have some sort of personal interest in this. And when Honoré Mercier, that great-great-grandfather, founded the Liberal Party, the word liberal had a sense to it, had a meaning to it. And it referred often to people who were willing to do the hard work of running the province, but there was an anti-clerical bent to it. They wanted to be free of the complete dominance of the church, and they had to do it carefully because they were always being watched over by the church. But it was the beginning of real effective government here in Quebec, and that was back in the late 1800s. Well, sure enough, the Liberal Party today doesn't know what it stands for, doesn't know why it's called Liberal. Because you'd never know it from any of the discussions. And for Mr. Tanguay to continue to say that it's absolutely fine for him to be the interim leader while keeping the door open for a run at the permanent leadership just shows how much the party has no longer has any steering mechanism whatsoever. Because he said at the weekend, this is amazing, he said, well, I can't really be in a conflict of interest because I haven't declared myself to be a candidacy for the permanent leadership yet. Well, first of all, that's transparent nonsense. It matters not that the leadership race hasn't started yet, and that's the only reason he's not a candidate, because nobody is. But at the same time, every decision he takes, every decision could have the appearance of a conflict of interest between his personal interest, wanting to show that he's the one who can take over the party, and the interest of potential rivals. Because if he takes a decision not to let someone speak on his particular file, well, that can play in as well. So I think that overall, it's amazing that the party is so rudderless right now. They don't seem to know anything that they're doing. They don't seem to stand for anything. And if you go through the history of it, the liberal side of it, that freedom part, that openness, that part is being lost slowly but surely. It was always a progressive party economically. Go back to Jean Lesage and Robert Bourassa. And then all of a sudden we've had very good people, by the way. I take nothing away from Daniel Johnston or Jean Charest or Philippe Couillard. But let's not kid ourselves. All three of them were economic right-wingers. Charest was even the former head of the Conservative Party. And now, again, another great guy, but Andre Pratt, I mean, I've had a chance to work with him. I really, really do like the guy. But Andre Pratt, of course, is a Conservative, small seat. And he's the one who's looking at co-chairing this committee for the future of the party. If the future of the party is to try to knock off the Conservatives here in Quebec, well, then they can continue that way. If the future of the party is a voice of reason, bringing together all cultural communities and language groups and saying, let's build a better place where everybody's at home and you don't have a government that beats up on immigrants and people who don't happen to be identical to the ones who are in power, then maybe that Liberal Party should come back, and the people who think that that's the case should come out swinging. Instead, over the weekend, it was a series of people genuflecting and tugging at their forelock and saying, we've got to figure out how to be more nationalistic and connect with Quebecers. I think that we start connecting with Quebecers or anybody else the day we actually believe something. And for now, I can't tell you a single thing that this iteration of the Liberal Party believes.
I agree. And if we're getting a glimpse of the kind of job that Marc Tanguay is doing as an interim leader, how he would be as a permanent, the real
that
leader.
That should take care of it. That should take care of it.
I mean, really. Yeah.
Tom, I want to ask you one lesson before we run out of time. So this nationalist bent that came up at the convention, can you please define nationalism when they say we need that kind of a view within the party? We welcome those voices. Is that a separation view? What is that view necessarily when you define nationalism that way?
That it's Quebec first. That's the definition of it. I think that's the simplest definition. So you'd see yourself as a Quebecer in politics, and this is the big thing because, for example, André Fortin, who's a very competent MNA from the Outaouais region, one of the few outside of the Montreal area, he committed the unforgivable crime of helping the federal Liberals in the last campaign, and he'll probably never be forgiven for it. I think that it's probably doomed his chances of ever becoming leader, and he would have made at least an interesting candidate and had some ideas on the table. So I think that that's the basic idea. They would like to see more Robert Bourassa and less, dithering about questions of Quebec first.
So
it's Quebec only, Quebec first. That makes you.
Well, the other thing is too. This has happened twice in the memory of current memory of the Quebec Liberal Party. When Mr. Ryan lost his 1981 election, so he won the referendum in 1980. 81 gets thumped by the Parti Québécois, and the Liberals were reduced really to the rump in those parts of Montreal where they had essentially large Anglo or Allo communities. And so it started a bunch of fights within the party because the people who were left were saying, well, we're not going to go against the feds and, we're not going to vote for this. And we do like the Charter of Rights, that sort of thing, despite the fact that there was a unilateral repatriation. Well, it was only Robert Bourassa coming back that was able to put that party back together again. Because he was able to dominate the whole discourse. But this is this is not Sorcerer's Apprentice stuff. This is something for people who know the game, know how it's played. Robert Bourassa didn't have to go on the public record the way he did, but I remember, at the time of the failure of Meach, for example, he openly mused about, maybe I'll be the one to take us out of Canada. I think that that's the type of game that some of them would like to see played again, but I don't think it's a smart game. And it was the type of game that was played when the Liberals decided to use the notwithstanding clause despite the brown shoes decision of the Supreme Court, and that's what led to the departure of several really strong MNAs like Cliff Lincoln and Herb Marks, for example.